Right, afternoon everybody. Just quick intros. Tom Silvester is the CEO, Loisaba Conservancy. I've dragged Swabir, who's head of technology for 51 along because any technical questions will be directed at him rather than myself and Tom. So to start, EarthRanger for the whole organization. And this is, it's not moving EarthRanger away from the front end, but it's looking at the historical data and utilizing that for management. So it's issues surrounding EarthRanger, utilizing the data. EarthRanger has been so incredibly successful now for the protected area management. But I think it's moving into a space of better utilizing, like I said, the historical data to drive management and support management in their decision making. And I think something we've seen over the last couple of days, certainly with KWS and the way Kenya is going, is the connection between NGOs, private sector and government. And it's one equal playing field. And I think that's important that we're all steering towards that direction. So there's the original ecological monitoring, habitat management, human-wildlife conflict and logistics. But this is about moving it more into, career progression and the rangers and their motivation and tracking their performance, human rights and legal, and I think this is an important space and we'll chat more about that later, tourism and land use, conflict, peace and influence, and this is a big one in communities, and then driving national strategy. This is a quick example and on informed feedback on some work we've done with Lewa Wildlife Conservancy on some of their LoRa and some of their rhino monitoring. So the first up is tracking the Lewa rhino population from back in 1986 when the first rhino came in. And it's taking all that historical data, putting that into EarthRanger, and then moving it back into Tableau. And putting it in a dashboard that then, it's the individual rhino, it's the population, it's any translocations, any deaths, and studying that. Just a quick dashboard on some of the LoRa sensors. This is just one example of the environmental side. Then into tracking security incidents. And again, this example here is just a couple of months, but it's importing what is now going to be about 25 years worth of data into EarthRanger, analyzing that and drawing up the dashboards within Tableau. The same coming up now is an example of the white rhino and their population performances. And I think the important one of this is that historical data and being able to pull other databases back into EarthRanger and then doing the analysis in Tableau and down to the individual animal. That's where we've been struggling. The 51 team that designed this, we're working off 7 different spreadsheets, all for different organizations, and for once it's in one place. All right, Tom.
Thanks very much, Batian. Afternoon, everybody. So really, this is just an example of how we can sort of take EarthRanger and the power of EarthRanger and Tableau and move it away from the traditional sort of frontline protection scenario and move it into other areas of the organization in the protected area. So there's an example here of a fence report at Lewa, and what's interesting here for me is that we're able to bring in those logistic departments, maintenance department, and have it properly monitored and all that data collected so that we can help ourselves in the future making better informed decisions around everything, because as we all know, knowledge is power. And although there's obviously a desire to keep things simple, I think that what EarthRanger affords is this ability to bring all aspects of management of the protected area into one single database that then can throw up reports and dashboards. So logistics department, you'll be able to start looking towards integrating stock, tasking, you'll be able to have a job card put out, accountability, the manager in that unit will be able to sign off when it gets engaged. There'll be lots of different data feeds that feed into this management situation. So you've got satellite, you've got GSM, you've got LoRa, and they're all starting to feed into the single reporting platform, and allows us to then engage with Tableau and create some really good analysis on all that data. Another big highlight here as well is getting managers to really buy into the process. So you have forms that allow them to effectively sign off on a job. That means that they're going to have to get engaged. They need to look at what they're doing. They'll look at their performance, understand the costings. It's very helpful when you've got grants from donors that have multiple streams of engagement points, so you're able to do your cost accounting, be able to actually specify that particular action or that department was attached to that grant. And it also comes back to, particularly with things like fences, to link back into wildlife management. You start to understand which elephants are breaking the fence, et cetera, et cetera. So all the data starts to feed into, the cost of having that fence in that particular area, where are the hard challenge points, what are the individuals that are breaking it, and how long it takes to repair, et cetera. Just another example here. Again, just asset deployment. So this is an example from Lewa around the aerial asset deployment. And you can really see now, how many hours each aircraft is doing, what it's using, which one's being deployed where, at what time, costs based on it. And so that starts to create some data that you can look back on, which assets are performing, which ones are lazy, which ones are actually delivering. Again, cost accounting, really critical part as far as I'm concerned, with where you're trying to do multiple reports to donors or other income revenue generating areas, how that cost and resource allocation can drive it back down to be a cost center or a profit center. You might have a situation in Loisaba, we've obviously got, and I think the Lewa as well, you have a workshop logistics department that's doing other third-party outside jobs. We need to know what our energy is that we put into that department. Can we create it into more of a profit center, or is it just cost, and what do we need to adjust and change within that? So data is total power when it comes to that sort of thing, and I think the ability to track is the overarching benefit of EarthRanger in this situation. Canine deployment, another one. This is actually from Old Jogi. So you can really drill in to look at the performance of the individual animals, how, what their training schedule is, what their veterinary and health schedule is, which animals are being used most, which ones aren't, why not, what are the ages of those dogs, when are we going to have to think about replacement, when are we going to start sourcing to get that type of dog to replace a particular unit. And then being able to probably, other exciting thing I think about this sort of EarthRanger is this ability to start sharing information across protected areas. So people that we collaborate with, for instance, Loisaba is collaborating with Old Jogi, with Lewa, NRT, they're starting to benchmark, starting to look at sort of efficacy around best practice. Maybe those areas where, because of the overlapping, we don't need 5 canine units in that landscape. Maybe we can see that we can drop one off here and do whatever it might be. So a lot of collaboration can come out of having a single platform design with forms that are bespoke to each organization but speak to each other. Back to Batian.
All right, this is, as 51, we're currently within Kenya training, it's about 980 rangers. So we're putting all their individual data for, I think, 12 different courses that we deliver through EarthRanger. And this is a way to track them. This is a way to track their performance, feedback to the conservancies that we're working at, be it individual conservancies, Old Jogi, Loisaba, Lewa, or the community conservancies, and track that individual through every single course that he goes through. And this is important. We'll get onto the legal side a little bit later, but allows us to deploy the right people who have fulfilled what they need to from a training point of view to be deployed. This has helped, understand the effort we need to put into, be it an individual conservancy or the individual on where he needs to improve. But it's also duty of care. If we've got somebody that isn't performing, it might not be his problem, it might be ours. It's redesigning the courses, or it's moving him down a career path that is better suited to his needs. Just some of the examples that you can see on here, it's the weapon handling, medical training, fitness, navigation, legal, human rights, and being able to sort of drill down into the individual and how he's performed in each one of those has allowed management to decide what to do and where they need to put their effort, and allowed us as 51 to redesign what we need to for that individual.
And then just to chip in there as well, Batian, you got the cross-purpose of this, so it's not just security training and security personnel. We can bring this into our logistics department. You can have KPIs for mechanics. You can have review forms for all levels of employment, all starting to be pulled into one single area. You know, at the moment, typically managers like myself, we're going to have 5 or 6 different platforms, HR program, logistics, fleet management, all this sort of scattered about. So this is a view and a route to be able to try and coalesce this into one single part. And keep it simple, stupid kind of story where it comes to making those decisions that are going to really impact 10, 15, 20 years out.
Right, next one, and you've all seen examples of this, but I'm gonna play it. This is an instance about 6 months ago on Mount Kenya, and the reason I bring it up is it was cross-cutting to national parks, forest reserve, and private sector. So this was bushmeat poaching on Mount Kenya. So we deployed the helicopter with the 2 teams, and you'll see that come in just now, together with the canines, and then another ground team as cut-off. Yeah, this is normal stuff. This is not new to anybody. But I think the important thing about this is the legal templates behind it. The right to deploy, and that's from government, that's from the police. Our guys are police reserve status, so we need the sign-off from government. That needs to be recorded. That's attached to this incident. The individuals that have been deployed on that group, all their records are attached to that incident as well. That covers them, that they've had the legal training to be allowed to be deployed. The human rights side of it, it's as much the guys that were doing the poaching as the team that we were deploying, and it's duty of care from that. So we are going there, whether we like it or not, and we should go there. That's about 7 different forms that are attached to that. That package around that incident then gets locked away and is kept for any future use. And we've got lots of examples of where we've used EarthRanger to protect our guys, to protect guys in the field, and to protect organizations. And I think that's a huge tool that, it wasn't there in the beginning. It's very much so, it's there now. And again, happy to share with anybody, examples of what this looks like, because it's about protecting us and it's about protecting people on the outside as well. Just a quick example, and I know you're going to have there's a panel discussion after this, and Samuel from MNRT will be discussing it. But this is conflict data in northern Kenya. So NRT runs peace teams, government runs peace teams, county government runs peace teams, and other NGOs. And it's tracking the impact and resources put into stopping this conflict, and all the other indicators around that conflict. And again, this has been 2 years worth of data, and it's now bringing back to management where effort needs to be. I'm going to ask Swabir to present the next one. It's far too technical.
Hello guys. It's not actually that technical, but it has been my baby. We have been working with UNFAO, with IGAD and CWARN, who run the regional body for conflict and peace and interpeace. And they're now looking at the framework that NRT is using for community conservancy and the inroads that they have to the community to report data and how we can map that to other aspects. So we're looking at climate change, and here you can see in the animation, are you playing that?
Yep.
And you can see in the animation, this is PLU's, Predictive Early Warning Livestock System, which comes from the UNFAO on a monthly basis. And what we do on that is we overlay the conflict data, and we're trying to look at the correlations between the degradation of land and conflict that is happening on that land. Now, within the NRT ecosystem and the Laikipia ecosystem, we now have a wealth of data through using our LoRa network, We have sensory data which is coming in on soil moisture content, UV exposure, water levels, weather data, and all of this will feed the framework for conflict analysis. So we build a framework where we feed in all this data, and it gives us actionable data that we can go out and actually have impact on the ground. Thank you.
Thanks, Shobir. So I think that's really interesting, that sort of real scale management that can be brought in using these visualization tools and EarthRanger and feeding in. So another big area, obviously a big interest for a lot of protected areas, is tourism is a major revenue earner. And there's issues around over-tourism, over-utilization, too much traffic, poor guiding. We've all seen examples of what happens in the Masai Mara around the wildebeest migration. So what we've really been able to look, and this is an example from Lewa, just by tracking the tourism vehicles and creating heat maps, we can really start to look into the ecological management and how we impact with our tourism. And ultimately try and improve the experience for tourists, improve the experience for guides by being able to really monitor and see over history which areas are used too much, which areas aren't used enough, what is the impact on those areas, and that can feed back to a research program, whatever it might be. But this sort of really nice way to be able to look at a dashboard and at the end of the month I can have a look and see, okay, that tourism in that area was way too much. Let's look at what we do next year around a similar season, or what was the reason for it. What are the road conditions? Is there an area of the reserve where the roads aren't in the right shape to be able to encourage that tourism, et cetera, et cetera. And I think there's obviously some down the track, and maybe we're not really there yet, even an impact on insurance. We've been able to really, track these assets in terms of tourist safety and incidents that might happen or not, and that can all feed back into accurate calculations around, cost of premium and so forth. There may even be some need or some interest in wilder areas where the tourists can have a LoRa-enabled tracker. They can have a panic button on it. They can go out if they're going across long walks, whatever it might be, where they can actually be tracked and their safety ensured. Again, all feeding back into a sort of ER situation. So a huge area within tourism, I think, that we can start engaging more, and we're starting some little projects at Loisaba around it now, sort of pushing into the sort of more interactive tourism, trying to bring our tourists into really starting to help us data collect. So there's a sort of a bit of a citizen sound piece. We're able to sort of schedule our game drives now on the sort of as patrols within EarthRanger, and then we can sort of track it so tourists can start. We have issued tablets to our guides. They all have a tablet of their own. They record. They get in the car. They go to the tourists. They do you want to do a bit of citizen science data collection, switch the tablet on. That tablet will then record their track, where they went on their game drive. They're able to data entry when they see something of interest or a certain sighting. And that then feeds back into our data collection and monitoring, particularly around things like carnivores, which, quite often the tourists are going to be seeing sightings around that area more often than our patrols. So again, it all just feeds back into that overarching sort of monitoring, if you like. And then finally we can give the tourist a sort of link to that map, and they've got a keepsake of their game drive at Loisaba and what they saw when and how and etc. So quite fun, and I think obviously another big growth area to be able to push forward. Connecting landscapes. So again, speaking to what Shobir was saying about the huge sort of landscape and the importance of data sharing, and how that's going to be, whether it's security or wildlife or ecological monitoring across the landscape. Driving a single agenda, trying to make sure that we're all communicating, all the protected area managements are really speaking to each other, making best practice and so forth. So just an example on the screen there of a journey across Laikipia that's been tracked all the way on LoRa networks now, from Loisaba up in the left-hand corner there, all the way across down to Lewa on the right-hand side. And I mean, we're talking an area of a couple of, nearly 2,000 square kilometers probably, that can now be connected. That's sort of, in conjunction with 51 to provide the uniform system across the landscape, be it a single LoRa network, or maybe it's going to be LoRa networks that speak to each other, and how we design templates so that the data is meaningful to all of us. And there's sort of another sort of, on the other slide there, the sort of interest, and I talked about being able to track tourists, whatever it is, but in this case, we had the ultra marathon, 4 Rangers ultra marathon, and that's an example of a runner that was tracked all the way across the whole marathon. So again, safety, monitoring, input and data and so forth. I think over to Batian for some KWS.
You know, again, on the back of landscapes, and I think it's bigger than just our area, but it's incredible to see, you know, how that LoRa, EarthRanger, everybody working off a single platform is now coming together. And that's not just the private sector, that's community conservancies as well. But having rolled out EarthRanger now into KWS, some private sector areas, you know, it's the KWS regional headquarters, their national parks, private sector, and that's a huge area that it now covers. But that all needs structure. It needs structure on the data, it needs structure on the flow of that data. And on this next slide, I'll just show quickly how we have structured that data, because I think it is so important we're all working off the same page. You've got the KWS command center, and I am missing one point on this. You know, as well as the KWS side, on the conservation side, we're working very closely with the police. You know, we have opstrums that are linked to us, our main JOC in 3 different counties now, and that gives them real-time viewing of the teams and data that is relevant to them. So you've got the 8 KWS regional headquarters that are now set up and feeding data into the National Command Center. You've got the national parks feeding into it, and the marine side. The marine side is an area that we're growing and going to be a fascinating one, and that's, you know, linked in with what Ted and his team are doing. You've got private sector, and I'm sorry, I know there's lots of others that I haven't put on here. And then you've got national county reserves, all feeding into one system. You know, with the right templates, the right analysis, that's information going both ways. And that is now starting to work. You know, EarthRanger outside the conservation space, as 51, we worked with the FAO on the locust campaign over the last few years. So that was Ethiopia, Somalia, and Kenya. We were lucky enough to be able to flip EarthRanger to suit that and suit FAO for what they needed. And again, thank you to Jez and their team. But that was, you know, the last locust campaign was 60 years ago. So digitalizing all their operations was huge. But probably more importantly was the accountability it brought. Just this little example here is a survey and the spray aircraft. I think there were some interesting little bits. Every one of those aircraft, all their reporting was done through inReaches and templates that were designed and put on the inReaches for the pilots. Again, the accountability, you know, top left-hand corner, you can see the yellow lines. That's the spray aircraft and the data coming off the spray aircraft. That was a position every 2 seconds, you know, temperature, speed, amount of chemical. That was a huge amount of accountability that the FAO had on every single job that they had. This next slide, and again, it was Swabia that designed it all. It was the very beginning of patrols, but using the patrol function within EarthRanger for deploying aircraft, tasking them, for tasking the ground teams. And this was over 3 countries from one opstrom sitting in Kenya. And, you know, the power of that was huge. The accountability that came with it was even bigger to the donor community. And as you can imagine, with the amount of chemical that was being sprayed, there was a lot of answers that needed to be answered. Again, another little one that Swabia designed for them was tracking that chemical from the second it arrived in the country. And remember, this is, you know, I know we're showing you lots of Tableau and bits and pieces, but none of this would happen without the EarthRanger side. I'd organised it for your session. I promise you it's not that important. No, but being able to track something like chemical coming into the country, which store it went into, which aircraft it went into, you know, where it was sprayed, and which drum crusher it went into was huge. And it's just, again, another little application that came out of EarthRanger with some bespoke designing that made a huge difference. I'm going to ask Swabia to...
Yeah, another little passion project of mine. So we love EarthRanger, the platform. It underpins everything that we do right now. But at the front end, at the remote end, it doesn't really meet all the requirements, and it shouldn't. It's not been designed that way. So when EarthRanger Mobile comes in, that's going to be used in an operational way by the rangers. They're going to be feeding back the data and drawing polygons of instances out in the field, and that's all brilliant. But how do we meet the requirements of our engineers, our field teams who are going out there inspecting fences, building buildings, managing water holes, whatever the engineering task might be? So we've been looking at PropMap, where it's a software that manages engineering functions. The actual work order is generated in EarthRanger, pushes through to PropMap, allows the team to go out there. You can interact with them while they're in the field if they're having difficulty conducting their task. They record everything and send it back. Once it's sent back, it cancels the work order in PropMap and puts that to bed, but also provides a really in-depth dashboard for that department head. So for logistics and administration, this is going to be incredible, assigning all things to a cost center. Okay?
So this is quite interesting application. Again, at Loisaba, we're running a sort of integrated model of coexistence with livestock, wildlife, running tourism as a revenue generator, etc. So our cattle management and grazing management are incredibly important. And so thanks to Grant Burden, he's produced a couple of cow collars, and I've thrown them on a couple of herds, and we've now started to be able to monitor with heat map an area grazing impact around those herds of livestock. So that's what you see on the map there, and that again, helps us manage grazing better, helps us manage herd size better, be able to feed into proper ecological management and reporting, and on top of that, and Batian will speak to this a bit more, it's also going to help with the whole sort of carbon projects that are now coming up in the landscape.
In fact, on the carbon one, Kieran, do you want to stand up? I see you at the back there. Sorry to chuck you under the bus, but anybody with questions about soil carbon, Kieran's your person to find after this. But we're in the very early development stage of all their templates, again linked to the livestock and the grazing on their soil carbon, the NRT soil carbon project. So like I said, this is very early, but it's going to be an incredibly interesting one, and like it says here, this is the world's largest carbon project, or soil carbon project. Guys, I think that's it. We kept it short because we knew you'd just had lunch. Quick one. Is that playing? Some images that come off cameras in Sarah Community Conservancy that were put in by Connective Conservation. Again, I can see the two back there. So, is that playing? And they've been incredible. We sit at Lewa, 90 miles away from this, controlling the cameras directly in our ops room, and all these cameras, day and night, they're sitting 150 meters away from those water holes. And I hope the pictures distract you so you don't have too many questions.
Easy. Any questions at all?
Any questions?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as part of that sort of citizen science thing, if the client has taken some particularly good images of something, then absolutely we'll ask them they can form into a database. They'll help with individual IDs and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, very much so. I think the vision is to try and get our tourism as more and more interactive, right? And actually give people a learning situation, give them a vested interest. We'll hope to be able to then post stuff online for them to be able to see in the future how things have changed, what's happened, what their impact was, how to get them into the citizen science space in a really engaged way. And thanks again to our partner San Diego Zoo Wildlife and Arts, we're working with around this a lot, which was really helpful. Oh, sorry, nobody can hear me. Sorry. Did everyone hear that, or do I have to repeat it because I can't remember what it was already? Okay, so yeah, just to answer to your thing about the citizen science, I'm obviously trying to just engage clients and tourists much more around this space and trying to to see if we can engage. And I do believe that, you know, there's a drift and a sort of movement towards global tourism, particularly in the African sort of wildlife space, where people are much more engaged and much more interested. It's not just tick the big five. It's, you know, learning more about the ecology of the animal, all that kind of good guiding space that happens, and making it interactive and engaged is our ultimate aim. Again, you know, San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance have got researchers at Loisaba who will then do a little talk in the evening to clients about what research program they're doing, what the interest level is there, maybe even show them, you know, camera trap grids, how many leopards we've identified, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, a really engaged space is what we vision to happen there. Thank you.
Yeah, just a quick question. As we're trying to become more efficient and with the duplication of data, you know, we're obliged to populate different software platforms for different entities. One example in Kenya is, you know, we're obliged in the rhino space to fill in Kifaro, and then obviously we're doing EarthRanger. Some people are using Smart. There's all these different applications, and you know, we've obviously subscribed to EarthRanger, and we're committed, and we find it probably the most effective monitoring and security platform. But ideally, some of these softwares can talk to each other so that we don't have to populate the same information into a multitude of different platforms. And I don't know at the back end if this is something that is being worked towards. I think EarthRanger are quite open to dialogue in that space, and certainly going forward, I mean, using Aljogi as an example, we're hoping to strive towards green listing, and I believe one of the criteria is using IMET. So ideally, we can populate all the information into EarthRanger, and it fulfills that obligation.
So yeah, Jamie, at lunchtime we had this exact conversation with Patrick Amondi on, you know, how we can streamline everything. And Jess's answer, I don't know who from the EarthRanger team is here. I think there's a session on Gundy going on, which is now pulling all these different systems into one and feeding it in. So, you know, there's a huge amount of work that the ER team are doing on exactly that. You know, it's like the Lewa database, like we saw. That's 7 different spreadsheets or platforms to feed one, and you know that has to change. That will come, and you know, I'm looking forward to hearing what the ER team have to say on that, because that's going to streamline all of it. You know, and yeah, sadly that's not going to be. I'd love to just work off one, but that's not going to happen, I don't think. Is there anybody from the ER team that could maybe answer that? Well done, Ted. You're all over it.
Well, yeah, I mean, if Chris or Jess or any of them were here, they'd give a better answer, but I think they're all off on another session. So this morning, I don't know if you were at the Better Together session with Smart and EarthRanger. Any of the Smart folks here? Yeah, so Luke, I think I see up there, is that right? So talk to Luke about Better Together with Smart and EarthRanger and all the work they're doing on Smart. And I was just about Kifaru. I'm not sure where that is. I know that's the rhino database in Kenya. But Smart and EarthRanger, there's a great story there. So definitely find Luke or some of the other Smart folks, or Jess or Chris, and they'll give you a lot of details about how Smart and the data can be exchanged between Smart and EarthRanger. But I think fundamentally everyone in the space agrees with you. At the very least, you need to be able to exchange information between the two, because maybe you have better reporting tools in one and the other, and that's on the way. I don't think necessarily saying everything needs to be, say, EarthRanger is necessarily the right solution, but what we do need to do is make sure that the data can be exchanged between the systems so that you can use the right tool for hopefully that helps.
And I think the other thing is all those dashboards that you know you've been at the forefront of working with us on them. I think those dashboards sitting in management, you know, the heavy lifting's been done by the team, and that, you know, those dashboards are now as important to you as ER, but it was ER enabling them. You know, and I think we're not far off you sitting with 7 or 8 different dashboards, and that's all the information at your fingertips by 6 o'clock in the morning type thing. Right, thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.